Today we'll be finishing up our series on long-term athletic development, LTAD. Now, if you've been following along, you know that we've been talking about different ages and pretty much every stage of a child's life, an athlete's life, as they lead up into, of course, their sport. Today we're actually going to be covering some of the older athletes and a little more specificity, always a difficult word for me, as far as workout's concerned. But did you know that it doesn't stop there? Even adults need to be concerned with LTAD. The final episode of long-term athletic development today on the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast.
Welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast
with Garrett Williamson.
Health, wellness, exercise, nutrition, and a whole lot more. Got questions? Call us and leave a message at 251-278-EDGE or message us at Personal Edge Fitness on Facebook and Instagram, at Team PE on Twitter, or personaledgefitness.com.
Good day and welcome to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in for the conclusion on LTAD, or long-term athletic development. Now, with me today, of course, as always, is one of our exercise coordinators, Charlie Merlot. Charlie, as always, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it.
And glad to be talking about, you know that of all these, I'm probably the most excited about this one.
Without a doubt.
Because you're going, I know how it ends. I know what territory we're going to end up, and you'll see quickly why I like it so much. But real quick, if you want to get in touch with the show, you have any questions about this subject or any others, or any questions about dispelling the myths of health, fitness, and wellness, please reach out to us at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That, of course, is our website and our Facebook page, Personal Edge Fitness. Hit me up on Twitter at Team PE. All right, let's get everybody that may have not heard this. This is our fourth
Correct,
podcast
yeah, fourth one, yeah.
on long-term athletic development. Bring us up to where we are today.
First one we went over is going to be your active start, and that is 0 to 6 age range. And like we said, LTAD is based on your developmental process, not as much chronological. So that age range, it only is just a range that we're looking at for the development that the kid's supposed to be going through.
That's mostly where kids typically fall in there, but there can be a lot of range as far as that goes.
Definitely, and it can be at the beginning or the end of the range.
It's kind of a point of reference for you, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's where we really want to focus on developing physical literacy. And so, like we said, physical literacy is really just understanding your body and what your body is capable of during that stage. And so there's hardly any structure. It's really just kids playing and just getting them out there, learning how to explore their environment, learn what their body's capable of. And so, like I said, that's 0 to 6.
Sure.
And then the next one we went over is your fundamental stage. That's going to be around 6 to 10. That's all about building a base. And so, like we said, you're only going to get as tall as your base is wide. And so,
right. That strong foundation.
Just building a good foundation. And so, we're trying just to create a lot of potential there. And so by you establish the physical literacy, and then you want to build that base, build a strong foundation. And then from there, we really started to go into learn to train.
Right.
And so that's going to be anywhere from 10 to 14, 10 to 15, really getting into the next stages we were going over. Learning to train is really about teaching the kid how to train, really, teaching that intent, teaching them the movements properly, getting a little more in depth with the structure.
Sure.
And then from there, repetition. We hit on repetition a lot.
Right.
And so
you had a great quote about that. We've heard practice makes perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what you used when you talked about that.
No, not at all. So yeah, we really hit on practice makes permanent. And so, if you're practicing bad habits and you continue to practice that, then you're only going to continue to build on those bad habits. So yeah, practice makes permanent, not perfect necessarily. From there, we went to train. So once you kind of establish that base and you kind of get a good idea of what it's like to train and to build those general qualities, from there we're going to push straining a little more and really focus on building that armor that we talked about, focus on increased strength and muscle mass. And so that's really the phases that we've gone through up to this point. And today we're going to touch on train to compete, train to win, and active for life.
You can see this building. I mean, you can see easily how this should start to make sense now. I mean, you start off with, at the youngest of ages, in fact, at the beginning phase, remind me.
Active start.
We have a video.
Yeah.
I don't know. We may actually insert it in this podcast. We have a video of a fantastic example, I think, of active start. Our Eastern Shore manager and one of our directors just had a child, and the child was in the gym when he was working out. And I think that's the earliest picture we have, or video we have of active start.
He's definitely on the right track, for sure. So.
He's starting out the right way.
Good job, Josh.
If we can do the editing, then we'll have to put that video in. You see what's happening. Then we're teaching, then you go to the stage of physical literacy where you're actually teaching, the kids are learning basically what their body does. I mean, and understanding what these movements are. And when you're doing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, we've talked a lot about imbalance and what have you, the part of the cerebellum in the brain, that understanding agility, understanding dexterity, and basically those neuro pathways. And that's what you're developing. You're developing that. And in the prefrontal cortex, you're starting to understand, okay, when I do my arm this way or do this kind of thing with the muscle, then they understand how their body's moving. Then you go to that, building the base. I'm repeating basically what you said, but I love the fact that if you're doing LTAD correctly, you're going to have to learn how to actually do the exercises first before you can just start building.
Correct.
And too many times we've had kids come in here and we've had to actually unlearn a lot of things they do. So the part that we're getting to today is what most people want to jump to, I feel.
Exactly.
But it's so important to have those other steps. And they can be done. They can be done at any age. We have an athlete right now that we're working with, extremely fantastic raw talent. But I noticed that some of his physical literacy is off. We're working with him right now. We're going to improve his game just by taking those steps. And he's much older than that. Than that age group. So get us going down on train to compete. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so like you said, this is the stage that everybody wants to jump to because it's probably the most exciting or the most fun to watch. It's what you see all the professional athletes doing. You know, you're really getting to some more advanced training. And so the train to compete is going to be males 16 to 23 and then females 15 to 22. And so that's a pretty wide range.
Sure.
And so, I mean, you're talking about from varsity athletics all the way up into probably getting close to college, college age. And so the key to sports performance is producing more force in less time. And so, and I know we've talked about strength a lot in the last stage when we're talking about training to train and building that armor. And once you've established that base, that's what you want to do. But once you've established that base and you've built that armor, your strength is only going to get you so far. And so that's why we really emphasize power production and really putting that strength to work in a quicker manner. And so
it's basically teaching efficiency.
Yeah, and also in this stage, winning becomes more important. And so in your earlier stages, learn to train to train, still developing a lot of those general qualities. And so what matters is when you're winning in the 18, 20-year-old range, when, varsity sports, college, when you're getting scholarships, professional athletes or professional schools are looking at you, whatever that may be. And when you're younger, it's not necessarily as important. What's more important is developing those skills to prepare you for that stage.
By no means do we mean that in Little League you're not going to win.
Right, yeah.
What have you. This ain't going to make you better. But what we do mean by that is that it's going to make you a better athlete at every stage. But also the thing that, and I always want to bring this up, one of the biggest things you're trying to avoid through proper LTAD training. But I keep bringing it up. Dr. Andrews spoke about it. Yeah,
finding a way to cut out all the overuse injuries in youth athletics. And, he touched on taking a break from your sport and dedicating, 2 to 3 months of resistance training and focusing more on those general qualities instead of the specific sport qualities that you play. So I'm glad, somebody who's well-respected came out and touched on that subject.
That's why it's so important to not miss the other stages and jump to this stage. You don't have as many parents that want to go and see a practice as you do that want to go see a game.
Yeah.
You don't have as many fans that want to go see a practice that want to go see a game. So it can't be game day every single day.
Right, yeah.
It's got to be that leading up. And that's kind of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. And so strength is important, but what really matters is being strong in the context of your sport. And so what I mean by that is several studies show that an average person hits their maximal level of force from 0.3 to 0.4 seconds, and then sometimes up to 0.7 seconds. And so to put that into perspective, almost all dynamic movements, which would be sprinting, jumping, athletic things, happen taking less than 0.2 seconds. That being said, athletes are never going to reach their full force potential in competition because the movements they're doing, there's not enough time for them to be able to reach that. So if you take a power lifter, for example, he's got that whole time frame, 0.3 to 0.7, to reach that max level of force. Well, if you take a football player, for example, he's got to sprint down the field and make a cut. That's happening at a much faster pace and a much faster rate than what he's able to get to. And so that's why we want to train that power and that expressing that strength faster, and so that way it translates to their sport better.
That's what we were talking about, and when he's throwing out those numbers, that 0.3 to 0.4 versus 0.7, you said that, I want to say in the introduction of this whole program, and that is that, if you've got somebody, and I don't know the example you use, but I know the thought process, I'm going to use my own example, that some kid that can squat, got leg strength to squat 500 pounds, you've got a kid that can squat 300 pounds, but the kid with 300 pounds can get to that maximal effort faster than the kid that takes the 500 pounds. He's going to blow him off the line every single time.
Right.
Taking this process and learning all these steps instead of just jumping to this point is what's going to make the more efficient athlete.
Right. Like I said, once we've developed that base level of strength in those earlier stages, that's when it's time to direct our focus and start assessing the strength at a faster rate. And so, that's what power training is, and that's why we want to start focusing that during this stage. We focus on all these things because we've built a solid technical foundation in the earlier stages. So because we've built that solid base, they developed the physical literacy, and their form is good, then we can start, working on this stuff. But I mean, the truth of the matter is, if they can't properly perform a squat, if they can't hinge properly, then we can't work on these things because we've got to develop a good base first, and we've got to correct the imbalances and things that are really holding them back. So you got to have a good base, start with a good foundation first.
And this is why we say it's so important not to just jump to this part, though most people want to. That is that if you do jump to this and you don't have that foundation, like you're saying, you just said it. I mean, you've got to be able to do a hinge, you got to be able to do a correct squat and what have you. That right there is where you have the injuries in resistance training. Many times we ask, is my child old enough to resistance train, or can he do this and what developmental? It's mostly, the majority of that is, yes, it's developmental, but it's also, have they been through the correct development of their program? If you get a child that can squat correctly, that has gone through these different phases as they develop, much safer when they get to this phase.
Oh, definitely, yeah. For the most part, this stage right here, I mean, technique shouldn't even be an issue. We shouldn't have to go back and correct things. Talking about the 8 laws of learning we talked about last episode, and nailing that repetition, they should have done it so many times that it should be, muscle memory. It should be ingrained in their mind, and technique, we shouldn't have to coach that at this point.
That's the reason, because is it 5 of the 8 laws of learning, or repetition, repetition.
So
that makes not only a more efficient athlete, it makes a more efficient workout session.
If we can save time not having to coach and cue on technique and fix that stuff and really focus on the point of the session, what we're trying to get out of it, then I mean, it's going to make it more efficient. It's going to provide more value for the clients and the parents that are bringing their kids to the session, because we're not having to take time to slow down and teach. So.
And time is a big point of this, because we talked about it before. We've got athletes we've had come in here that have incredible schedules, not just athletics, but school and all that, incredible schedules, and trying to get that extra resistance training with us. That's where there's a dire need to get effective training in a short amount of time, because how many times have we talked to people and told them, you need to get done in here so you can get outside of here and go grow.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't grow in the facility, you grow outside the facility. So that's when rest becomes important, whatever. If you're not having to coach the exercise and the techniques because they've developed the correct way. So I don't mean to skip over this, but we go to our next point after this.
The next one's going to be train to win, and that's males 19 and older and females 18 and older. And so this is really your collegiate and professional athlete stage. And so by now the athletes have more than likely settled on a single sport, and training is going to become a little more specialized because they've already narrowed down, all right, this is the sport I'm going to play. These are the movements and skills that I need to focus on to get better. That's really what train to win is about.
Again, another stage everybody wants to kind of jump to. But you can see now, if you've watched all the podcasts, you've heard all the podcasts, you can see now how this is all building. And by that time, it's almost, I shouldn't say on cruise control, because we're still working, we're still building, you still develop these, you can develop at any age. But the correct technique, the correct form, how to work out, what's your body doing in space is a foregone conclusion by the time, well before you get to this stage.
In these later stages, the athlete really starts to take ownership of their program, really.
Sure,
And so,
sure.
I mean, I had a client come in last week, and he said, man, Charlie, my legs are shot. Like, we've been going hard to practice. I don't need to hit legs today. And so for me, that helps me out tremendously, because I don't have to go through and start going through the session. I know right off the bat, all right, like that we don't need to focus on legs. And so by knowing your body, developing that physical literacy, they start to take more ownership of their program.
Sure.
In the end, like, it helps them out, it helps us out, and that's what, build these stages building on each other. That's what we get out of it.
Through this, they're learning basic physiology, which you really should know if you're going to do this kind of advanced training.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody should know for that matter. But by that time, I mean, I know you're talking about, and smart enough to know where we would have an athlete come in and not tell us about soreness. We have adults that do that. And they don't want to tell us because they're afraid we're not going to work that area. And the best answer to everything is always continue to work the muscle.
Right.
Well, when it's sore and damaged, no, it's got to repair. And he's a young kid. He was smart and already knew, because he's been working with us, hey, look, we need to back off this. And you were able to shift their workout and get effective workout in that day without going backwards.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it was what he needed most at that moment. And
Period.
so, like you just touched on, I mean, this is important for the rest of your life.
I was hoping we were getting to that.
Yeah,
You knew I was.
This is going to carry over for the rest of your life. Sports are important, and we want people to succeed in sports, but it sets you up for what we're going to go over next, and that's an active for life, an active lifestyle. And so
You'll see quickly why I told y'all at the beginning of this that I knew the end already and why I was going to be so excited about this. But we're talking about LTAD is important at every age, including the rest of your life. Okay, Charlie, why?
you can enter the stage at any age, and so
Sure.
no matter if you play sports or not, active for life is the goal of LTAD. And so that's what we're trying to achieve through this process, is to create an active lifestyle that you can continue for the rest of your life. And so
He said that LTAD is set up for, that's the main goal of it, active for life. One of the biggest reasons for that is, of course, preventing injury.
Mm-hmm.
This is how many times I have somebody sit down in my office and they look like they're what we would call an apparently healthy individual. But how many times they sit in front of me, I want to lose some weight, this, that, and the other. I'm fine, but I've got to, and they'll touch a joint, or they'll touch a back. And I'll ask them, what is it? Sports injury? It's a old sports injury, or it happened in the weight room. And that's why this is going to make you active for life, because you're doing the correct steps to prevent those things. And I interrupted you yet again. Please go ahead.
we get clients that come in and they'll say, I don't play the sport anymore, so I don't need to sprint or jump or do resistance training or whatnot. But then they'll blame it, not be able to perform like they used to, and then they'll blame that on their age or there's a certain reason other than the fact that they just don't do those movements anymore, and they're not training like they did in high school. And that's something we're trying to continue through the active for life stage, is to keep doing those things that you did when you were young. And if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And that means
Absolutely.
exactly with your muscle and with your power ability. And so success in the prior stages is what's going to make the necessary motor skills, and also just give you the confidence to be able to remain active for life.
That's a great rhyme. You've heard it all your life and what have you. When it comes to muscular development, muscular maintenance, or not atrophying, not going backwards. Yeah, that's exactly it. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. I just gave a presentation this morning. This is why I'm so excited about this, talking about live age. One of the slides I have in that presentation shows athletes doing lateral movement. That is one of the things in our lifestyle that we stopped doing. We don't have a requirement to do lateral movement. In other words, moving sideways. We don't play tag, quit playing soccer a long time ago, whatever. You don't move sideways. And the majority of cardio pieces, all the way up until 2014, did not move sideways. They went straight forward and backward. Well, as an exercise physiologist, we know you're going to deteriorate the hips, especially the medial glute. And that's the outside hip muscle. It protects the hip. It allows you, if you're starting to fall, and we fall at all ages, you've fallen every year of your life. Doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't just happen to seniors. It's happened to all of you. Just didn't talk about it because you were able to move the leg sideways and catch yourself when you fell. Or when you fell, you had this nice pad of muscle around that hip and you didn't have any problems with it. But later on, as that deteriorates, we fall and break a hip and what have you. And that's kind of what we're driving at, as far as like, you don't use it, you'll lose it. Sorry to go off my tangent. You knew I was going to do that on this phase.
I mean, no, you're good. But people stop training for these activities. They'll go play pickup basketball for 2 hours, and then they'll wake up the next morning and be like, man, like, why am I hurting so bad? Or, and it's because you're not, training for these things. You go to try to do something your body's not used to doing. And that's a lot of times where an injury can happen, is because your body's not prepared for it.
And it doesn't have to be, I told you, I put sport behind me. I'm not playing sport. I'm not going to play pickup basketball. I'm good. Gardening.
playing with your kids.
Playing with your kids.
Running around. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a sport, but really just kind of high intense, activity that your body
reaction, stress. Yeah. Grabbing a door because it's closing too fast and you want to reach over and grab it real quick.
Yeah.
And injure yourself.
Really kind of any reactionary movement, know. And also resistance training helps maintain bone density, and so that's going to help fight osteoporosis, the degeneration of your hips and stuff as well. And so you don't have to worry as much about, fracturing your bone if you fall.
Right.
And then being physically fit drastically reduces the cause or the all-cause mortality rate. And so that's, in itself is more than enough reason to continue doing some sort of a fitness regimen.
Absolutely. Of course, fighting obesity and what have you, all the things that I always talk about, you've heard me talk about when I talked about obesity. You heard me talk about it when I talked about live aging and even live food. I spoke about it in there. The number one killer is not heart disease, it's obesity. But I'll get way off on a tangent there. Again, going back to LTAD, once you get to this stage of your life, and like you said earlier, you can enter any of these stages if you've never done any kind of training before. We had a client start with us one time, was my best example of this. Never worked out before, never been in a gym before, never wore athletic clothes, didn't know what athletic clothes to wear, and did not know where to buy it. And his trainer did all of that for him here at Personal Edge. Even at that stage, obviously, no physical literacy, no understanding of a base and whatever. We had to take that individual through each one of these steps, building it up. So even if you haven't been an athlete and you're older, you want to get started, you can go through this at any age. You can go through any of these different points. I want to drive that home because I know we need to use the ages so people understand the developmental age, typical developmental age. But these teachings, this education of LTAD, you can start it anywhere.
Definitely. And I feel like a hip fracture is a very common thing that we see that happens. And, there's also a lot of people wonder, I just fell down, like I fell several times before, like how, I don't know why this just happened. And there's been several studies, to look at, what is the cause of this happening. And one study compared an elderly female population who fell and had a hip fracture to either people of the same age that went through resistance training or people younger as well. And they found that the people who were elderly and didn't go through a resistance training program had type 2 muscle atrophy. And so basically the type 2 muscle fibers are your fast twitch fibers. That's where you get your power from. And so if you start to lose those fast twitch fibers when you trip or whatever happens and you go to catch yourself, you're not going to be as twitchy. You're not going to be able to react as fast. And so that's what leads to the fall. And then, like I said, the osteoporosis, not doing that resistance training, your bones are become weaker.
Right. And again, absolutely nothing to do with time passing on a calendar. Degeneration being associated with time passing on a calendar is an absolute lie. Maintain that development using this type of a system, starting wherever you need to start and continuing through. Basically, it's one of the 3 parts of the fountain of youth. I mean, water and nutrition being the other 2. Mm-hmm. And we've seen it. We've seen it with people of all up and down the scale of numbers and ages and whatever. I mean, the lady that leads knows me saying this, lady that pretty much leads the, as far as athletically, leads the ladies class on Saturday. She's in her 80s. She does all these things correctly, knows how to do them correctly, therefore doesn't injure herself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do we avoid this? How do we avoid these injuries later in life?
Most importantly.
And so, that's what a lot of people listening to this are wondering, like, okay, you've told me this information. What am I going to do about it? I think you touch on this greatly, and that's the live aging components and activity, nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset.
Right.
I think you couldn't be more right about that. Also, as far as training goes, power training, and so it's going to look differently from an athlete going through power training. But really, power training is just trying to move the weight fast with that intent that we talked about. And so, not just going through the motions, but actually, trying to move the weight as fast as you can, and also balance training. Right. That's something we focus on a lot here at Personal Edge, and just helping the clients feel comfortable standing on one feet or hopping side to side and things like that, where they don't do that often throughout just their day. And so when they come here, they get some exposure to that, and it keeps them being able to still do those things.
And some of those exercises he's talking about, they go back all the way to the physical literacy standpoint. You touched on one of my favorites, which is balance, and that one gets so associated with time passing on a calendar, and it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with activity. Everything to do with activity. You start off as a toddler, the neural pathways in the brain and the cerebellum are like a dirt road. Through sports and whatever, we increase them, we make them all the way into an 8-lane superhighway. When we start becoming dormant, we start becoming less active, we stop doing these motions, that goes back down to the dirt road. We can turn it right around again, and we've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So
we've seen several people, their balance, they can't hardly stand on one foot, and then after weeks or months of practicing and training, and their balance it's great. They're like a gymnast,
and exactly their confidence.
Right, the confidence
goes up.
The mindset is key. I mean, the fact that they feel comfortable, standing on one foot and trying it, because a lot of times, they don't even want to try at first because they automatically think, well, I'm going to fall, or I'm going to look silly, trying to balance. And so really just, building that confidence is huge.
The other thing that I want to make sure we cover before we go to the end is he mentioned power training. And he mentioned power training in the training with Train to Win, but he also mentioned power training just a second ago, talking about Active for Life. And the reason we're talking about that is that I feel one of the big reasons, that's the way you live. The times that you cause problems and have injuries, typically it's some sort of a fast reaction. Mm-hmm. It's a fall and not being able to catch yourself. I did something too quick. And the reason we have difficulty, we find that we have difficulty later in life with these challenges, is because we don't continue to train that way. We don't continue to make sure those things don't happen. And like Charlie said, it doesn't have to be powerlifting like somebody that's playing football that does. But you need to train the way you live. Mm-hmm. I've thoroughly enjoyed going through all this with you. And go back and look at if you didn't get a chance to hear the other podcast, we've got a series of 4 on LTAD. It tells you all about that, take you through each one of these developmental stages. This is how important this is to us. This is how serious we take everybody's training. Yeah. I mean, it's real easy, very easy for us to come in here and replicate something you saw on TV that a professional athlete's done with your 8-year-old. And this is another reason why we have started kids so young, but we'd much rather do it safer. We'd much rather do it so that they can end up active for life, and basically train them better for their sport, but bring them to their own level of wellness in a healthy way. Exactly. Charlie, I appreciate you being on the show with us. And if you have any questions on this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can contact us at 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. Also contact me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. Charlie's at Charlie at personaledgefitness.com. That is also our website and our Facebook page. We have a lot of questions that come through on those. Feel free to reach out to us that way. You can also reach us on Twitter at Team PE. LTAD, taking it from, 0 all the way up to an active lifestyle forever. Just one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for listening to the Personal Edge Fitness Podcast with Garrett Williamson. Subscribe now and be a part of the show by calling 251-278-EDGE or message us on Facebook and Instagram at Personal Edge Fitness or at Team PE on Twitter, and visit us at personaledgefitness.com.